Nana knew that finding a man who would be willing to perform such a humiliating task would be so difficult. She stood in front of the crowd as she pleaded for any man to come forward and drink her urine. All the men looked at her disgustingly as they murmured between themselves and laughed. Once upon a time, there lived a very beautiful princess who was the only daughter of a very great king. Her name was Nana, and she was greatly loved by her people. Not only was the princess extremely beautiful, she was also well spoken and nice. The villagers all loved her and could not understand how a princess could make a common villager feel like the most important human alive. Princess Nana had a way of making people feel so special, and the people were always delighted to be around her. However, not everyone shared the same sentiment, as Princess Nana turned out to be a completely different person behind closed doors. Her palace maids were so terrified of her as they watched her lord over them in the comfort of her room. The princess would punish her maids for hours in her room and order them to wear a big smile on their faces whenever they were leaving the room. They dare not mention to anyone the ill treatment they faced in the hands of the princess, as Princess Nana threatened to deal with anyone who spoke ill about her. The princess was a completely different person whenever she was in her room, so vile and arrogant in comparison to the kind and compassionate princess that the entire village knew. One evening, after a long day around the village, the princess returned to her room exhausted. She was extremely hungry and thirsty and screamed at her maids to serve her dinner. The maids brought her food in a hurry as they feared what she would do to them if they delayed. Princess Nana, without thinking twice, rushed down the food and realized that it was extremely hot. The princess fumed in anger as she ordered her maids to gulp down the hot food, burning their tongues in the process. She then went on to order them to chew raw pepper in their already sore mouth, and the maids languished in extreme pain. The next morning, Princess Nana was summoned before her father the king, who informed her of the villagers' decision to honor her with the title of the most prestigious maiden in the entire village, and the princess could not contain her joy because this title was one of the most prestigious titles to be bestowed upon a maiden in the village. With the title, the princess would automatically become the most sought after princess around, attracting all the rich princes from the neighboring villages who would come to seek for her hand in marriage. This was a title that was not easily given, and the princess was over the moon. Her life was finally going in the direction that she had always envisioned, and she could not wait to be honored with the prestigious title after the upcoming Festival of Lights, which was a few weeks away. Princess Nana returned to her room excited. Her maidens stood in a corner, terrified, as they could not risk putting the princess in a bad mood. Later that afternoon, Princess Nana took a stroll around the village. The people were so delighted to see their princess as she spoke to them kindly and provided them with gifts. Just as she was about heading back to the palace, an old woman who looked terribly sick vomited at her feet. Princess Nana, with all the courage she could muster, pretended to be compassionate towards the old woman, who looked at her and said that she knew all the terrible things that she did behind closed doors. Princess Nana was so terrified to hear this. She rushed off to the palace, panicking as she summoned her maids into her room and ordered that the snitch among them should reveal themselves. Her maids, shaking in fear, swore to her that they had never spoken to anyone about it. The princess found it hard to believe as she ordered her maids to cut off their tongue to ensure that they never spoke again in their lives. Princess Nana felt a twisted sense of satisfaction as she watched her maids languish in pain. "Now, let me see how anyone will ever know what I have done," she said to herself as she smiled mischievously. As the days went by, Several young men from the village approached the palace to declare their intentions to marry the princess, but Princess Nana dismissed them all without a second thought. She believed she was destined for a grander match, one that would solidify her status and bring immense wealth and prestige to her family. One day, a young businessman from a nearby village came to ask for Princess Nana's hand in marriage. Many considered him a perfect match for the princess, who barely listened to his heartfelt proposal before rejecting him with a cold smile. "My future lies with someone far richer and more powerful than you," she said dismissively as she walked out on him and never looked back. The villagers, who adored Princess Nana, began to whisper among themselves as they questioned the reason why the princess had refused to choose a suitor. Little did they know that the elders had decided to honor the princess with the title of the most prestigious maiden in the entire village. As the day of the festival approached, Princess Nana became increasingly nervous as she could not wait to be honored by the elders before the entire village. She envisioned her life after the ceremony and how rich princes would troop into her palace to win her heart. The thought of this filled her with excitement as she could not wait for sunrise. She went to bed that night, excited at waking up the next morning, which was the day of the festival. A few hours later, Princess Nana woke up to find herself kneeling down on the floor, surrounded by the village elders who looked at her confused as they wondered why the spirits decided to choose their loving princess as the face of night. What this meant was that in the entire village, Princess Nana possessed the darkest of hearts. The spirits, on the night before the festival, usually chose a person whose heart was most wicked and presented them before the elders in black to be used to cleanse the village of all its atrocities. The person is to be paraded around the village dressed in black, with the people singing aloud and beating their drums hard, purging their own sins by projecting them onto the chosen one. It was a tradition meant to cleanse the village from all of its atrocities. Princess Nana was so horrified. She had always prided herself as a kind and loving princess, never believing that her true nature would one day be revealed. Now, she stood in front of the village elders, dressed in black, her heart pounding in fear and shame. By morning, the villagers gathered, whispering in disbelief as the announcement was made. The kind and beautiful Princess Nana, the king's only daughter, had been chosen as the face of night. The entire village was shocked as they watched their beloved princess dressed all in black. As the procession began, Princess Nana was paraded through the village as the villagers sang aloud, releasing their sins and dark thoughts. She walked slowly, her head bowed, feeling the weight of her actions and the judgment of her people. Her father's face was a mask of sorrow as he watched his beloved daughter being paraded as the face of night. He wished he could do something about it, but his hands were tied as any attempt by him to rescue his daughter would lead to not only his death but hers as well. As the procession continued, Princess Nana reflected on all the terrible things that she had done. The chants and drumming, though meant to cleanse the village, began to cleanse her as well as she realized what a terrible person she had been and how she truly needed to change if she ever wanted to be accepted again by her people. After the ceremony, Princess Nana was taken to an abandoned hut at the edge of the village. She was to remain there for a year, reflecting on her actions and seeking forgiveness from the spirits. The village elders decreed that only after this period of isolation could she return to prove to them that she had truly changed. The princess lived in seclusion for 1 full year, stripped of her title as she lived as a commoner, tending to her own needs. The entire village kept away from her as their tradition forbids them from mingling with the chosen one. During this time, the princess regretted how she treated her maids, who were always there for her to make her life a whole lot easier. Doing things by herself made her to appreciate her mates and wish she treated them better. When the year was over, Nana returned to the village transformed. However, she still had one more task to perform to enable her live amongst her people again. This last task entailed her finding a man who would be willing to drink up her urine, to vouch for her and stand in the gap between the spirit and herself, to swear that she had truly changed and learnt from her past mistakes. In cases of this sort, the man who would stand in for her would be obligated to marry her to ensure that she lives up to her promise. Nana knew that finding a man who would be willing to perform such a humiliating task would be so difficult. She stood in front of the crowd as she pleaded for any man to come forward and drink her urine. All the men looked at her disgustingly as they murmured between themselves and laughed. Nana stood there with her head bowed. She could feel the judging eyes of the men who were unwilling to humiliate themselves because of her. Just as she was about giving up, a young man stepped forward and said that he was willing to take up the task. The people froze in shock as they watched the young man step forward to volunteer. Nana too could not believe her eyes. She was shocked to see a man willing to go through such humiliation just to save her life. This single act taught the princess that true kindness and humility can exist in even the most unexpected places. She watched with tears in her eyes as the young man ignored the crowd and drank up her urine without hesitation. The village elders, moved by the young man's act of bravery, declared that the spirits were now appeased and Nana was allowed to return back to the village, this time not as a princess but as a commoner. She was to live with the young handsome man as his wife, and Nana soon fell deeply in love with him. Though she was not allowed into the palace as a princess, her father ensured that she lived a comfortable life as a commoner. Nana ensured that she apologized to her maids for the terrible things that she did to them. She asked for their forgiveness, and her maids, despite being scarred for life, forgave her for all that she did to them. That was how the princess lived amongst her people with her husband, who turned out to be a poor hunter in the village. She learned her lesson the hard way and lived all her life, atoning for her sins. The lesson to be learned from this story is that you should never look down on others or treat people unjustly because you believe you have the power to. Always be kind to the people you come across because you do not know what the future holds. Nothing in life can remain hidden forever, so think twice before you act. I hope you enjoyed the story.
Like, subscribe and leave a comment. It helps us grow our channel. I'll see you in our next story. Bye.